All right, here we go. This is the new episode of Know Before You Go. Today we're going to be talking about the Silverstone GP. And I've got a few people joining me today. I've got Greg with FanAmp.
Hey everyone, how's it going?
Got Andrew with F1 Destinations. And
Hi.
We've got the virtual stat man, Sean Kelly.
The actual stat man today, of course. Not the virtual stat man, my handle, but I am the actual stat man, live and loud.
Yes. So, it's been a little while since we've had an episode. We've been up to a few things, and we've all kind of traveled a bunch. Personally, I went to Le Mans for MotoGP. I can't remember when the last one was. Was it right before Imola, or was it during Imola weekend?
It was right after Imola weekend.
And so you and Andrew were over there. And then after that, you went to Barcelona, and Andrew?
I went to Monaco
Right.
from Bologna, and that was it. And then waiting for Silverstone in 2 weeks.
Yes, which Greg and I also had Montreal last weekend.
And so I did Barcelona and Montreal. So I jumped a little bit myself.
Yeah, a few different time zones. And Sean, what was your experience at Montreal?
Oh, the usual. Rain coming in sideways, gale force winds, frozen weather. It's a typical Montreal summer's day, really, on that Saturday, as we all try to avoid dying of hypothermia. But those of us who did live to see Sunday saw another dominant performance by Max Verstappen as he attempts to break this record for consecutive laps in the lead of a Grand Prix. That's my way of jazzing up the fact that no one can touch him right now.
What is the record, and when can he break that record?
The record is 305 off the top of my head. Alberto Ascari. It's one of the oldest standing Formula One records. It stood since 52. It's either 52 or 53. And Verstappen, I forget what number he ended up at, because I've been busy looking at other stuff. But it's 71 laps in Austria. I think that there is a chance. I'm going to double check this right as we're talking about it, because I don't want to give it erroneous information, but I knew that there was a chance he might be able to tie it in Austria. Stand by while I look it up.
But Verstappen has basically led every lap of the last 3 and a bit.
Last 3 in a row, yeah. No one had done that for 11 years, not since Vettel back in 2012. So that in itself was unusual. So Verstappen is up to 224. So he cannot break the record in Austria. He'd be 10 laps short. Because it'd be 71 laps.
Does the sprint race count towards that?
No,
because it's not a Grand Prix.
It is not Grand Prix. No, so you can't count that. But it is another little nook that you'll have in the Formula One record books, of course. If you could add those numbers and he leads every lap of the sprint, you're going to have this situation. Well, there'll be an asterisk. You know, it's like, well, I kind of sort of did. As if I haven't already had a nervous breakdown about the whole Kevin Magnussen was on pole in Sao Paulo thing. They added to my torment in Montreal by Nico Hülkenberg qualifying on the front row. And I was telling everybody, so now Haas have got a front row to go with that pole position that they won from 8th on the grid in Sao Paulo. What? Trust me, I told them, they didn't listen. And then they gave Hülkenberg a penalty, which means they've now got a pole but haven't started on the front row and a front row without starting on the front row. Any questions? No? Good. Okay, let's move on.
You're talking about Canada. I had a question about Canada because there's already some talk about how the calendar is going to shape up next year. Talking about maybe Saturday races in Saudi and Bahrain to start the year. And there's talk of wanting to move Canada, but it's a very hard race to move, isn't it?
Absolutely,
because of the weather. Mainly.
Yeah, the first time Formula One raced in Canada was in October 1978, and that is generally acknowledged as the coldest Grand Prix that has ever taken place. It dropped to about 5 degrees Celsius. It was barely 40 Fahrenheit. And then somebody at some point, a few years later, they said, wouldn't it be a good idea if maybe we move this to a time where we're not freezing to death? So they moved it to June, and now we freeze to death in June instead of October, with the rain coming in sideways, which you must admit is at least a trade up from having, an ice storm coming in sideways. So, that in itself is a thing. It would be nice. The week after we left Montreal, it was a heat wave. Everyone was saying, wow, it's so hot here now. And I was like, well, where's this been the last 2 years we've come here? And we always get the crap weather. And then as soon as we leave, it's a lovely summery day.
2019 was lovely.
Exciting qualifying. Like that day we were sitting there, Adam and I were both together there, and like it made for a much more exciting qualifying session.
Yes, I do agree from the on-track activity point of view. I always favor a little bit of rain.
Right. Especially for qualifying.
But if you're having to brave the elements, I do feel for the spectators who actually have fought their way into the racetrack. There's actually by the wall of champions, behind the wall of champions, there's this sort of river that runs across the path, which I started calling the puddle of champions. You had to jump across the puddle of champions to get to where you were going, and I mean like literally leapfrog. So yeah, there's a new installation at Circuit Shield, the puddle of champions.
You didn't see the jet skis? You didn't ride the jet skis that they had?
Well, the puddle wasn't quite that big, so I didn't get involved. But there is an idea. I will give it to Stefano Domenicali. It's a good idea for next year.
They had a jet ski company that was letting you trial the jet skis, like the day of the rain, as if anyone was looking to get in that lake. You could have done
well. Yeah, well, if you're talking about the Olympic rowing strip, I have actually been in that rowing strip. I've swum a triathlon in that rowing strip, and it is surprisingly mild water. It's not as cold as it looks, especially when it's actually a cold day. You get in it, you're like, oh, that's not nowhere near as bad as I thought it was going to be. And now I'm actually in here. I don't want to get out. Because when I get out, the wind's going to make me cold. So if I just sit in this water, it's actually not so bad. So pro tip next year, hospitality in the water, in the Olympic rowing strip. Just have like some sort of periscope situation where we can see on a mirror, we should see over the barrier.
Look up.
I'm freestyling now. I'm really coming up with great ideas. This is what, like when you're in the shower and you're thinking about, existential things like that. Yeah.
We'll
carry on. Yeah.
Well, of course, Silverstone is a circuit that's quite often wet and not particularly summery weather, isn't it? I'm trying to remember the last full wet race. There was a bit of rain around last year, but there wasn't there.
It's been a while since we had rain on race day, I think. We did. It did rain on Friday. I remember being pretty cold there on Friday last year. And we've had the wet hit qualifying. You're right. It's been a little bit of a while since we had rain actually in the race. Answers on a postcard, ladies and gentlemen. Who can remember the last wet British Grand Prix? I remember plenty of wet qualifying sessions and practice sessions, but actually the race? It must be, surely it wasn't 08 was the last time we had a fully wet British Grand Prix.
Well,
and that was comprehensively wet, that race.
And that was one of Lewis Hamilton's best performances, was it not?
Yes, I believe it still represents. I believe, the largest winning margin he's ever had in a Grand Prix. I think he won it by a minute and something.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and he's never surpassed it. But that was certainly one of those defining races that removed any doubt about his title-winning credentials as a driver, not necessarily in terms of scoring points, just the sheer skill of the driver, where everyone else was pirouetting around the track. That and Fuji 07, of course, when he absolutely smashed the field. Again, Alonso had a big shunt in that race. Everyone was going off the racetrack all over the place, and Hamilton never put a foot wrong. So,
well, it's a good thing that quite a few of the grandstands at Silverstone are covered.
Yeah, so you can experience that Canadian Grand Prix feeling of having the rain coming in sideways and hitting on the side of the face.
Underneath it, yeah.
In Canada, there's only one covered grandstand, whereas Silverstone there's a good number, probably 10, I would say.
Yeah, it's almost as though they're familiar with the weather. But of course,
it's also been quite hot at times at Silverstone in recent years as well.
Yeah, but bear in mind that Wimbledon is about to start, which means it's going to rain. So it'll be a heat wave until Wimbledon, and then once they start trying to play tennis on a grass court, you get all that going on. But the thing is obviously they're used to rain in the UK, but you do get the crosswinds as well. It is a former airfield, of course, and consequently, you are going to be out in the elements more than you would be on a typical. Is there a typical racetrack these days? I don't know, but that by association, you are in the elements because it's an airfield and there's not very many tall structures.
Yeah, I feel like Silverstone kind of follows a typical circuit just because it's one of the few that's out in the middle of nowhere, similar to Circuit Americas in Austin or Spa, where just outside the city, there's not much around it. It's mostly two small roads to get to and from, and it's always just a bunch of congestion. And if it rains, the parking lot is just a mess.
But
Yes.
I think it was worst in what was it, early 2000s, 2003, something like that, when it was a wet year, and the car parks were just complete bogs.
Well, yeah, that
More
was
recent than that.
that was actually the incident you're referring to there was when Bernie Ecclestone put the race on April the 23rd of 2000, and that was actually a retaliatory move by Bernie, because at that time there was a fight for the future of the British Grand Prix, and it involved at that time Brands Hatch, who had done a deal with Bernie to take over as the official host of the British Grand Prix, because Silverstone they weren't moving with the times. They weren't updating facilities and whatnot. So Bernie kind of moved it to that date to show them just how terrible their facilities were. And boy, did that work, because we saw, in living color, all these cars were getting towed out of car parks on tractors because they got stuck in mud. But even then, it took another 10 years before they actually did any real infrastructure upgrades with the new pit building and what have you.
It was what, 2008, 9 maybe?
The building was there in 2010, and I think they moved the start in 2011. I think I've got that right, because there was one year we raced there, which I think was 2010. The building wasn't finished, so they were racing past the building, but they were still using the old pits. And I think they moved full time in 2011.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember his time.
Yeah, I remember being there in 2009, and it was still, they hadn't built anything. So I think 2010 was the year where we had this skeletal structure rising out of Club Corner, and we thought, well, this is going to be weird. This is going to be the start line. How odd.
Greg, maybe it's a good time to put the map of Silverstone up, and we can talk about some of the corners and the famous incidents and where to watch.
Let's do it.
Exhibit A.
Exhibit A, yeah.
Yeah, so
Class
the circuit has been around for, I don't know since when. It's one of the originals from the original
the 50s,
calendar.
right?
Yeah, I think so.
Late 40s, I think, was the first race. 48.
Yeah, the first race was 48, and it was part of it. Of course, it hosted the very first World Championship event, May 13, 1950. So it is ground zero for the Formula One World Championship as we know it. It wasn't called the Formula One World Championship back then; it was just the World Championship for drivers. But yeah, that's where it all began. And alas, the actual start-finish straight is no longer in use, because it used to turn what is on that map the Hamilton Straight. Well, it turns right at Abbey now. Well, it used to turn left at Abbey, and it would head all the way left from Abbey all the way down to Woodcote Corner. That no longer exists, but that was the start line. That's where the World Championship actually started. The very first time they were flagged away, even before lights were used, was there in 1950.
And was the Queen not at the first? No, 1948. I think the Queen was in attendance.
The Queen never attended a World Championship race. The King was at the first race. It was King George VI.
Okay.
And Princess Margaret, so the sister of the Queen, the future Queen. She was then Princess Elizabeth, of course, was present at the very first race, who became Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Who, of course, at the time was just Queen Elizabeth, because she was married to King George. She was also present for that very first race, I believe. It was won by Giuseppe Farina, and Alfa Romeo finished 1, 2, 3. And Bob Gerard, who was racing an ERA that day, said that we weren't in the same race as them. It just started at the same time.
So, let's
thanks
talk
for the
about
royal history. Though. I think the
right.
Americans would have been especially.
Sean Kelly, royal correspondent for the podcast. Back to you in the studio.
So, Silverstone has looking at this map, it looks a bit cluttered. It's kind of a big mix of grandstands and hospitality, and then in general admission areas. And what's something that's new this year is the GA Plus, which is some additional viewing platforms for Sunday specifically. And what always throws me off about this circuit is that all the corners have names, used to numbers, and it has always been difficult for me to remember.
That throws you off?
A little bit, yeah. I'm used to turn 1.
I don't know.
It's not a grid. It's hard to follow.
I can never remember the numbers, but I remember the names.
And also, since I started following the circuit, it changed. And so that's where it also just makes me confused. I mean, I know the circuit, I know the lines, I drive it in iRacing all the time, but I cannot remember the names. I know the Hamilton Straight now and the Hanger Straight, and I know Maggots Beckett's Chapel.
Where did Verstappen and Hamilton come together in 2021?
Is that Cops?
It was. Yep.
But you should, as Christian Horner said, you should never ever try and overtake. It's a ridiculous place to overtake, unless you're Valtteri Bottas passing Lewis Hamilton and you manage to do it cleanly. You know, that sort of stuff. And it's the lead of the Grand Prix, and and it's your teammate. So yeah, it's impossible to overtake there unless you can.
Yeah, obviously. And so one thing about the circuit is it just, the way the layout is so wide, I feel like it just lends itself to some really good racing. And just every year, it's recent times, it's just been an incredible race to watch on TV.
Well, I agree with you. And this gives the lie to this fallacy, I believe, that the idea of having a slow corner, a long straight, and a slow corner is perfect for overtaking. It's not, because some of the best racing we see every year is on this racetrack, and there's very few big stops on this track at all. And you see, I mean, last year's race was one of the best races I've ever seen, and I've seen more than, I think, 600 as a fan of Formula One races, and I've worked on more than 350 of them, and that was one of the top 10 best races I've ever seen. Especially in the final 15 laps or so.
The closing laps were incredible. The atmosphere of the circuit was amazing.
Yeah, and there's that famous, of course, Crofty moment when he yells, "Through goes Hamilton," as he passes Perez and Leclerc. Now, if you're watching that on television, there was a huge roar that you heard on the television. That was a real roar. That we actually heard that in the venue as well. It was like a football crowd. It was incredible. Like, there was people on their feet. Like, I mean, like if they were sat before, they leapt out of their chairs. I think me included, because there was just this visceral moment of thinking, "Oh, I'm getting involved now emotionally, because I'm going along with this," because no one thought Lewis Hamilton would win that race, and then suddenly there was this dawn of like, hang on a minute, he might. He's got a chance here. And after the way he'd been, robbed of his title in 2021 in the eyes of so many people, I think there was a lot of Mansell-esque cheering for Lewis that wasn't really apparent when he was winning every championship after championship.
Yeah, and that's one thing that kind of surprised me about Canada is the crowd in Montreal is really vocal, and they would boo Lewis, but then other laps they would cheer him. It just seemed like whenever I spoke to people, it's like they got tired of him winning so much. They just want something new to happen. And Montreal has a lot of repeat visitors, in which I know I've had a group of friends that go to Silverstone every year. And the same thing, the vibe, the crowds, everything just seems really approachable to just about anybody, no matter what seat you have, whether it's during admission, grandstand, or hospitality. It seems like everything is just kind of a good, welcoming vibe. It all just depends on your budget with what you can afford. But if you can get a covered grandstand, it seems like that's definitely the way to go. And with all the high-speed corners, I mean, I love seeing the cars work at speed, especially when you can see all of them at once. You can really tell who's pushing, where the arrow is working, if these cars are better mid-corner, if they're better exit, better in braking, things like that, that can really, or helps me pick a grandstand at least.
Yeah. It is one of those tracks where you can really see what a Formula One car can do. This and Spa and Suzuka. It's like, okay, now it's F1 in the wild. They're not captive. They're not captive animals like they would be on a street track. Now we're really moving 175 mile an hour corners. Changes of direction through Beckett's is extraordinary, and seeing them go wheel to wheel, side by side with each other through Stowe, which is a really fast corner. And you realize, like, okay, now you're seeing the respect between the drivers, because they all know, like, we're not messing. This is serious speed, and we can run wheel to wheel and not have an accident.
So I guess comparatively, like we've talked about Miami before in the past year, that was like just a point of comparison, where this feels like you're getting a lot more value the action's going to be much better on track. Like the atmosphere is excellent. I guess just to give people perspective at home, this feels like a great way to go.
Yeah, it seems like I think I guess the difference from this circuit compared to something like Miami or Spa is that it's one of the more remote circuits, and it seems like this is definitely geared towards camping. There are ways to get to and from. You just need to take into account the time frame for either a bus or train. But it seems like camping, or this is probably one of the best, if not the best, circuit to camp at. Andrew, I don't know if you've got some points on you can touch on that.
No, I'd agree. Yeah, the camping is super popular at Silverstone. It's relatively affordable. There's a good choice of camping. You have kind of young person campgrounds, which are probably going to be a bit more rowdy and have live music and bars and that kind of thing. But you also have family camping, specifically designed to be, quieter and for families to get a good night's sleep. So there's a good mix. And of course, staying relative within a short walk of the track is a huge advantage at somewhere like Silverstone, where you don't have to worry about parking or driving in or taking public transport to get to the circuit. But in terms of, if you do prefer to stay in a hotel, probably the best two cities to stay in are Milton Keynes and Northampton. I stayed in both for the race, and I would say I definitely prefer Milton Keynes, especially if you stay in the centre. It's quite lively. There's plenty of restaurants and things to do. And it's, it's not too far from the track, 20 or 30-minute bus ride or taxi or drive.
And are there shuttles free that go back and forth to the circuit to Milton Keynes?
They're not free, but there are shuttles. Stagecoach organises those. You cannot buy tickets in advance, but it's a really well organised system, and I think the tickets are pretty cheap. I'm not sure what they will be this year, but
£40 a day, or if you did a round trip, or you can get, they have like a group rate for, I think it's close to 90, but you get 5 people in for the weekend. So
okay,
it's actually like pretty affordable. And they run every half hour, so you're able to get them if you got to get there early. You're going to deal with a line.
And there's another bus operator, the name of which escapes me right now, but they organise buses from pretty much every major city in the UK, including
Megabus.
London, of course.
Yeah,
Megabus, that's the one. Yep. So wherever you are in the UK, you can pretty much get to Silverstone on race weekend.
And so another way to approach is also by train to Milton
That's
Keynes.
Right. Yep.
Or
trains
Wolverton.
from London Euston Station to Milton Keynes, and then the bus. And those trains are pretty quick as well. It's less than an hour between London.
Yeah, I think it was like 48 minutes or something when I looked the other day.
Mm-hmm. I've taken that train many times, and that's a piece of cake. It's a very easy way to get there. In fact, if anyone's thinking of going to Silverstone, combining it with a trip to London in general, it is actually possible to get from Silverstone to central London by the early evening while the sun is still up. I've done it myself back in 2010 post race. I went down to London afterwards and watched the World Cup final because it was the same day in central London. So it is eminently possible, in theory at least, to combine your Silverstone trip with perhaps you could even take in a show. Who knows, on the Sunday evening, depending on how good you are at getting out of the racetrack post-race. Because if you get stuck in there, well, you might end up, trying your luck on one of those campsites instead. By the way, the campsites, I think, make the atmosphere at Silverstone. It feels like a music festival. It's like going to Coachella or Glastonbury. And Austin feels similar to that, in my opinion. So it's one of those races. It's a little bit more rough and ready. It's not going to be Abu Dhabi, but if you don't mind wearing some Wellington boots and getting a bit of mud on you, you'll have a great time.
But even things like the food and drink offer have been really much improved over the last 10 years. It's not just burgers and fries and hot dogs now. You've got food trucks serving all sorts of food, and it's not cheap per se, but it's a good entertainment offering and food and drink. And we should also mention, there's some pretty substantial trackside concerts now on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday night. This year, Black Eyed Peas are playing on Saturday night, and Calvin Harris as well. Yep, is playing.
Yeah, it seems like I read that they expanded the fan zone as well, which is on part of the infield of the circuit. I don't. Yeah, they expanded the fan zone, and then I feel like there was something else that was new as well on the inside. It might just be the map with the infield access, which I'm not sure if that requires a special ticket. I see it mentioned on like GM Plus.
Yeah, there's something called Inner Track, and if you're thinking about going to Silverstone next year and you buy your tickets early, make sure you buy your Inner Track access early as well, because it does what it says on the tin. You can go inside the track, and that's especially good for some different vantage points, but also the ability to get up to the entrance to the paddock, where the drivers and team bosses and everyone arrives and leaves during the day. So if meeting the drivers and getting autographs and selfies is important to you, you need to get the Inner Track access, and it does sell out early.
Yeah. Another thing that I saw for the accessibility to see drivers is the fan zone. They do the fan forum, I believe, and I think it's Saturday afternoon. And I think most of the drivers should be making appearances as long as everything works out with their schedules.
Yep.
One of the questions that came up from 3 purple sectors was any information on coaches from Brackley. And I know one of the things I saw was like that's not something listed on the Megabus option. And I know that the official shuttles don't run from there, but I don't know if you've heard anything else or if there's like local shuttle companies that might be running something separate.
Not that I'm aware of. Sorry, I don't know about Brackley.
And then the other one was from Will Gray. He was asking like any specific suggestions on where exactly to eat during the race, or like any favorites maybe you've gotten from one of the stalls that you might recommend.
I had some fun food at Le Mans that stood out. I got like a sandwich that was some sausages and just covered in fries. It was like I never seen anything like that. I don't know if there's any kind of like food that you see at Silverstone or some of the campsite.
I can't say I've had anything particularly memorable at Silverstone. Although if you're in the area, the towns nearby, the town of Silverstone itself, and nearby there's some really good pubs, and I'm sure the atmosphere on race weekend is awesome.
Yeah, one thing that I saw was that they're kind of mentioning the offer of vegetarian and vegan options at some of the food trucks now. So I feel like that definitely helps. Like my wife, sometimes it's pretty hard to find something that isn't just a burger or fries or just something that's just heavy and fried in oil.
Well, I think that's across Formula One these days, isn't it? I mean, whether we go to Australia or Silverstone or anywhere, I think there's a cognizance that the Formula One audience is a little bit more discerning, which could be considered annoying or high maintenance to some people, but it means more options. I mean, personally, I like there's vegan food I like just because of the taste. Beyond Burgers and things like that. I love those. I think they taste nice in their own right, that whether they've got meat in them or not. It's just the next step in the process, and more power to them. In Bahrain, it's the same. I mean, there was a Costa coffee in Bahrain at the Bahrain track, a Costa coffee. Like you're going to, and they didn't serve chai tea latte, and I administered a full reprimand to them about it and said, sort it out for next year, guys. I'm not happy.
BYO.
One other thing worth mentioning is you get really good bang for your buck in Silverstone with the on-track action. The schedule is always really packed. So this year, Sean, maybe you can help, but Formula 2, Formula 3.
Yeah, we should. I think we've got a full itinerary.
Porsche Supercup, historic demonstrations each day. And I'm also seeing Aston Martin 110th anniversary demonstration on Friday, probably on each day as well. And as well for the Pirelli hot laps, often with, F1 drivers at the wheel and celebrities in the passenger seat. I think a few years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, Sean, did Lando Norris not spin out in McLaren?
Oh, now you're
I think
asking.
I think it was 2018 or 19.
Was it? Yeah, I mean, I remember. I thought you were going to ask me about when Alonso drove the 1951 Ferrari, the one Ferrari's very first championship race at Silverstone, and he was all arms and elbows in that car. I think they had that car out again last few years. I can't. Someone help me out. I'm sure that car ran again on track sometime recently because it belonged to Bernie Ecclestone, and that's how it ended up there. And they put Alonso in the car because at the time he was racing for Ferrari. I'm actually just looking at the draft schedule from F1 for the weekend, and yeah, boy, it is packed. There's a lot going on.
Is Academy on there? Because someone was saying W Series is there in the past.
No, F1 Academy is only. I mean, I think they're planning for next year to have all the F1 Academy races on the F1 schedule. But this year, I'm trying to think, is it only on in the USA, I believe?
It seems like a test run, and I think they race the Circuit of the Americas this fall.
Yeah, there's one other thing that's unique will be new at Silverstone that we've never had before, and that is that Brad Pitt's Formula One film is supposed to be shooting on track. So that will be something that none of us have seen before. Because it currently is listed on the rundown as filming activity brackets high speed, and that is on Sunday morning. So that's race day, and also on Saturday. See if they've got anything on Friday. No, they're filming all 3 days. So whatever it is they're going to do. Supposedly it's a modified F2 car and blah, 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 blah. We'll see what form it takes. But that will be something where it's like, wow, okay, none of us have seen this before. Let's see how this goes.
You'll have to add it to your list of stats, like how many laps Brad Pitt leads.
Yes, well, he will be the oldest driver to have ever participated in a World Championship event. If you really want me to play along with this, I think he'll be 4 years older than any other driver to have ever participated. The current record belongs to Louis Chiron, and he's held it since 1955, when he himself was 55 years old, I believe. Brad Pitt is currently 59, I believe.
Wow.
So, yeah. It's a remarkable comeback and really puts Alonso in the shade. Forget Alonso's numbers. Brad Pitt's comeback's been amazing this year. He'd be sliding into that second Aston Martin, giving Lance Stroll all sorts of headaches.
Of course, it's. I remember Tom Cruise making an appearance last year. It's quite a popular race for celebrities in the paddock. I think it's fair to say.
I just want to see Martin Brundle ask Brad Pitt some questions again.
Yeah, well, Brad Pitt would be correcting him. We say, well, actually, Martin, if you've actually been on the track in the car, you'll know that you want to run these sorts of settings. It'd be interesting to see how he discusses the graining phase on the C3 compound tire compared to the C2. And if he comes back at us by saying, yeah, it was a real bitch there, the laps 3 to 6, but once the graining phase was over, I found I had a lot more grip.
And it was good. What about from like a seating perspective? So Adam, you had mentioned the sort of like the GA Plus as a different option. Like, what is that for people watching? And then what were some of the areas that you guys think people should kind of get to early in the morning if they come in with GA?
So with this circuit, general admission is kind of spread out into a few key areas that are highlighted in the picture, but some of the areas are more inclined, so you get a better view compared to like Montreal, where it's just flat, and basically if you're not up against the fence, you don't see. It seems like here, because it's open, and some of the seating areas are just on a small incline, kind of like a natural amphitheater, like Circuit of the Americas in Austin. How anywhere you sit, you can see pretty far compared to just a car flying by right in front of you. The only thing is getting there early, or making sure that it helps to have a group with you where you can kind of trade off and holding your little spot down with either chairs or a blanket or something that you can really kind of claim your space. And
or be naturally sociable so that you can make friends quickly around you.
Exactly. That's another thing to definitely do is just start talking to your neighbors, your seat neighbors, and it definitely helps build a vibe. You can kind of banter a little bit back and forth. Just share a beer together or buy them a beer. They might hold your spot, make sure nobody sits right in front of you with a chair when you're sitting on the floor on a blanket. That's always annoying. just things like that. It definitely helps to make friends around you. And typically, I mean, you're there all day, so you're going to spend a few hours together. Even if you're somewhere sitting at a different quarter the next day, I mean, it helps to just talk to people and just be friendly and don't be kind of antisocial and in your own little bubble. It can help make the experience a lot better when you're more friendly with your neighbors.
Don't be antisocial. Be in your little bubble. That's our job as permanent F1 staffers. Don't steal our act.
Yeah.
Don't come near me. Don't come near the car.
Don't come near me. Don't come near me, people.
It's also worth mentioning the fact that Silverstone does roaming access. I think some of the roaming has been discontinued, and to be honest, that's a trend in a lot of races that used to have what they call Free Friday, but where you could sit in any grandstand. But because so many more people go now, they've had to kind of discontinue it. So I should have checked this before, but
they don't have it this year
at all for grandstands. I think grandstands on Friday. I think you can sit in pretty much any grandstand if you have a grandstand. So. If you have a grandstand seat, but
I think that
general admission, no.
Yeah, I think they sold specific roaming tickets or roving grandstand tickets.
Yeah, that's what they call it, roving.
Yeah.
Okay, that's something to check.
I
didn't think it was completely.
Somebody's cat is in distress in the background. Is there a cat? Oh, right. We got a fifth guest on the show here.
Yeah, that's Simcoe. She's had a rough day today.
Oh, it's because he or she is upset because there's no roaming Friday.
yeah, exactly. And another thing that's new this year is the General Admission Plus, which is some viewing platforms, which I can't find any images or details on, but there's a couple that some of the general admission areas. I think it's
you'll see them kind of highlighted. It's hard to see here, but like the green ones, I believe, are the blue, or where you get like the plus area.
Yeah, so hopefully those don't take up too much of the general admission space, where that people have kind of been accustomed to and repeat visits like that. It's kind of what has happened with me at Circuit of the Americas. What Turn 19 has eventually become a grandstand that gets bigger and bigger every year. So the general admission spot that I like to sit at is just shrinking and shrinking. And it is one of the coolest spots to watch because you get access to the grandstand. It's one of the few high-speed corners that you're kind of sitting above it. And it's just slowly been shrinking and shrinking. So that's one of the downsides of having these types of tickets, like the GA Plus. Hopefully it doesn't take up too much of the space.
I know as well at Silverstone they're building some trackside villas, and I think I'm not sure it's either side of Beckett's, but I'm not sure which side. And I know that some people that used to watch, like watching in the general admission from that area, are pretty disappointed this year because it's a construction zone for these new trackside villas.
Yeah, I saw that.
And what about on the grandstand side? And just to jump in, I did Google it quickly. So the roving grandstands are Friday and Saturday, but not Sunday. And you did have to buy a ticket for that.
Yeah. So what changed? You didn't have to buy a ticket. Yeah, but what changed this? You do have to. Okay, right.
Yeah.
It used to be included also for general admission on Friday and Saturday, but not anymore.
Yeah, so I guess they're just trying to cap the numbers of people just hopping around all over the place.
Yeah, but you could buy it if you're going to go Friday. You can buy it right now. There's still some available, not for Saturday though.
Yeah.
But where would you recommend people be? We've highlighted some of the favorites, but are there any in particular that really stood out as like either a good value or really great for action, maybe a little bit more expensive?
Who was that question to?
Everyone.
I was about to say Andrew.
Well, unfortunately, every time I've been to Silverstone, I've been working and I didn't really have a great opportunity to go and check out different parts of the track. Of course, you can normally tell by the pricing of the grandstands. And something we didn't mention for Silverstone this year, which angered a lot of diehard, regular fans, was the dynamic pricing when the tickets were launched. Silverstone tickets normally get launched, on the weekend of the race for next year or soon after, and so this is back to July last year, and huge demand for tickets. And, general admission, started at something like for 3 days, started at something like £180. And within, 24 hours, it was, close to £300 or more. So, if you missed out early on, you're paying a lot more in a short period of time. So that I wouldn't say it was a particularly, probably successful experiment for the bottom line, but it did make a lot of regular fans pretty angry, those that missed out on getting their usual tickets at at a reasonable price.
Yeah, I know my brother was in a virtual queue for like 6 or 8 hours, just all day trying to get tickets because it was just taking forever for people to check out. And then you would select a ticket, and by the time you get through the queue, it was a different price. It was hundreds of dollars more than from when you first selected it.
And something as well this year, Silverstone did not work with any other ticket providers. Normally they would give the third-party ticket providers some tickets, an allocation of tickets, but they did not do that this year. They wanted to sell them all themselves.
It's interesting. I didn't know that.
Did they? Well, I mean, there's Friday ones available. Did they end up selling out holistically, or are there still?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Silverstone website right now, they're saying that there are tickets available. I mean, there's inevitably, a few tickets held back, but pretty much, the race has been sold out for quite a few months now.
Yeah, so for grandstands, I for this circuit, I would probably sit at one of the faster corners like Copse or, Woodcote. There's always good racing out that corner, especially going into Brooklands.
Woodcote. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm from Texas. I just prefer the high-speed corners, and it just seems like Copse has always kind of been action-packed. I don't know what the vantage point is to see down towards Maggots and Beckett's. I don't know how well you could see from there.
Well,
but also, go ahead.
I would say, you want to see the cars coming towards you, coming up to Copse Corner, because there's often a lot of passing on the track happens at Copse Corner. And it's quite an iconic view because that's where the old start line was. So it used to be the low down view as they come through the heat haze towards you. Is a very well known shot in Grand Prix history. So that's usually and of course it is wickedly fast corner as well. So you can't believe the car will stick at the speed they throw it in there. So that would be my first pick, I'd say. But
Sean,
it depends.
I think we've both had some experience of the UTC building, correct?
Yes.
Which is quite close to Copse. If you look on the map, just above the National Pit Straight, opposite the old pits, there's a building there, and that is it's actually a school, Silverstone UTC. I'm not sure what that stands for. Technical College. I'm not sure, but that is where F1 Experiences has their Champions Club hospitality with a nice big roof terrace. So both Sean and myself have been in there a few times, and being close to Copse, it's a great view there. Absolutely.
How does that compare to Stowe?
I haven't had the pleasure of watching at Stowe Corner, sadly.
I would say Stowe. I've not been in the grandstands at Stowe, but they do feel a little bit further away from the track than you feel at Copse Corner. And my preference would be Copse Corner, I would say. And then if you want to get pictures, you want to be down at Club Corner because that's relatively slow speed. And if you're trying to get pictures of the cars, there's also the podium down there, of course. The podium's down on the corner. It's an unusual podium in that it looks outwards to where that Club Corner C grandstand is. So that's really, if you want low speed stuff and you're not bothered about seeing the car going as fast as it can go, that's practically the best seat in the house because you can see the tails away shot of the race start. You can see the checkered flag moment. You see the podium. You can see them arguing over track space coming down into the Vale. That represents excellent value for money.
And was it not Club Corner last year where Lewis Hamilton made his famous double overtake?
Goes Hamilton at the exit of the exit of the Vale as Leclerc and Perez argued with each other and ran wide, and Hamilton nipped past. And then, of course, battle continued all the way around to Village Corner.
Another thing that's good about Club Corner is seeing the pit entry, so you can see the race strategy just change in an instant during the race. It's just something that I like to see.
Actually, this is important to mention that the pit lane is not at the same elevation as the track. So
yes,
at the entrance to the pit lane is at the same level as the racetrack, but it disappears because the start finish straight is slightly uphill. So they built the new structure on level ground. So that means that as the start finish straight goes uphill, it obscures your view at the end of the pit lane. So those people who are in Abbey B can't really see the pit lane, but people down at Hamilton Straight A and at Club Corner, they can see that end of the pit lane.
And that, Sean, that made them change the order of the pit boxes. So normally the fastest team would be at the pit entry or the pit exit, but in Silverstone they're in the middle, correct?
I can't remember. Forgive me for not remembering.
I think I'm correct in that.
Yeah,
that was rhetorical.
Yeah, I can't remember. From week to week, they swap them round and so on. Because I think in Montreal, for instance, the best teams are at the end of the pit lane. In Montreal and Melbourne, they're at the end of the pit lane. Most of the tracks they're at the start of the pit lane, and lose track.
I think you'll definitely find at Silverstone the fastest teams are right in the middle.
I'll take your word for it.
Where you can still see the track, and I definitely know. I've been actually the first time I went to Silverstone in 2018, working with F1 Experiences. They had the 3-seater F1 car, which was super cool. The 2-seater, sorry, which was run by Paul Stoddart, and I'm trying to remember the guy that used to run Keith Wiggins, who ran the Pacific F1 team. And it was right at the end of the pit lane, right next to Sauber, and Charles Leclerc was in his first year, and I was able to watch his pit stop during the race, from right next door in the pit lane, and I was with some guests and we were taking them around, and we were all high-fiving because we got to see up close an F1 pit stop. Sadly, 30 seconds later, he came to a stop with one of his wheels about to fall off. So it wasn't a very successful pit stop.
The kiss of death on his form.
Yeah,
there.
we were.
But actually, it was important of things to come for Charles Leclerc, for whom the anvil drops on his car almost every week now.
Yes, indeed.
I call him the wily coyote of Formula One. No matter how hard he tries to catch a roadrunner, the anvil lands on him instead.
When's the last time you won a race? I'm trying to remember. It was last year?
It was a year ago. It was Austria last year. We're just coming up to... That's the last time he or Ferrari won a Grand Prix.
He won 2 last year or 3? He won Bahrain.
He won Bahrain, Australia, and then Austria.
Yes. Yeah.
Austria was after Silverstone last year. So Sainz won at Silverstone, Leclerc won in Austria, and there's been nothing since.
He's overdue. Like the rain, he's overdue.
Well, indeed.
Something that I think it's also worth mentioning when it comes to the British Grand Prix is if you're traveling from further afield from Australia or South Africa or USA, is the amount of big events on in the UK during the summer. Probably the biggest being Wimbledon tennis. The championships.
And the men's final will be on the day of the race, the British Grand Prix.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can't do the men's final and the British Grand Prix unless you get a really fast train back, and it's a super long match.
You get a helicopter.
Yes, but you could certainly go to some of the lead-up matches. It's on for 2 weeks, I believe. The weekend after the British Grand Prix is the Goodwood Festival of Speed, and that's looking particularly exciting this year. You've got Mick Schumacher in his father's Mercedes, I believe. You've got Sebastian Vettel bringing some of his old F1 cars. It's a fantastic event. I've only been 1 year on one day, but it was great.
I need to correct myself. It's not the men's final this year because it's a week later. It'll be the middle Sunday of Wimbledon. I thought it was the men's final because the qualifiers actually start tomorrow, which it implies that normally it's a 2-week tournament. So I thought, hang on a minute, that's the same day as Silverstone. No, we'll be in the middle of the Wimbledon tournament. So you can, in fact, take in both showpiece events on UK soil if you want to have a week stay in the United Kingdom.
And there's probably some music festivals and all sorts of other things happening as well. I know it's Glastonbury this weekend as well, of course.
Yes, that's Lando Norris's fiefdom there. That's his part of the world. He's from there.
What about the factory tours? Like I know Red Bull, for example, they have some, but they seem pretty sporadic and definitely sold out. But can you do that? Is that a big thing?
Williams does tours and got a pretty impressive facility. Certainly around the Grand Prix, it would probably be difficult to do a tour unless you book well in advance. But I'm trying to think. There's a few other museums as well in the UK, not far from Silverstone, motorsport or motoring museums worth going to. And in London, you've got, what is it, the F1 arcade?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, I've seen some pictures there.
Yeah, I'm yet to sample it as yet.
Maybe
get
on
around
this
to
trip.
it one day. Yeah, maybe on this trip. Who knows?
I think
I have
they're
to confess. Sorry, go ahead, Andy.
And I think they're looking to replicate it in other cities. Did I not hear something about
They're
Boston?
opening one in Boston.
Yeah, Boston.
Right. I haven't been to it partly because on a day off, I don't really want to go into Formula One stuff. I'm like, can we do something that's not F1? It says the man who was at the Formula E race yesterday. But then I was working, admittedly. But yeah, it's just like, okay, if everybody else wants to go, sure. But I'm never going to initiate it.
Well, I'm on holiday this week, and I visited an F1 track.
Which one?
The Portimao track on the Algarve.
That's right.
Very impressive facility. Really nice part of the world.
Did you do a tour, or was there anything
No,
on track?
there was. I think there was motorbike testing. I didn't hear any cars on track or motorbikes on track. The go-karts were definitely operational. And I had a look at the Algarve Race Resort, which is on a hill overlooking the track, which is a really impressive hotel as well.
It is quite hilly. It's got plenty
very
of
much
elevation.
so.
Yeah, it's not a flat racetrack like well, I don't want to say Estoril wasn't a flat track completely, but it's got a lot of ups and downs for a modern autodrome. Yes, it's one race I would love to have attended in 2020 or 2021. It didn't happen, but
Yeah.
It was the only race really, that and Russia, I think, where we had a crowd really in 2020.
In 2020 there was a small window of time in September where there was a limited number of fans in Mugello had a few. Monza had a few.
Mugello would have been awesome to go to. That's a circuit I would love to see F1 cars there, or MotoGP. I've just always wanted to go there.
Well, Mugello had the distinction of being unaltered. It was built in '74, I think, and it hasn't been altered. So it literally was watching Formula One cars of the modern era on a 1974 racetrack, and they're absolutely flying around that track. They're 190 miles an hour around the what are they called, the Casanova corners?
Casanova Savelli.
Without lifting, and you're just like, bloody Nora! I cannot believe how fast they go around there. I mean, it's the one that doesn't pull your head off your shoulders. It's so much G-force.
Yeah, I'm sure that was a brutal track. And I think that's where, Bottas was doing a safety car restart, and people thought that they were going already, and then just piled into the back of a few cars.
Yes. A little bit of comedy gold there with your Formula One Grand Prix of 2020.
Yeah. So I guess let's circle back a little bit to places to stay. We touched on camping, but I know hotels are a pretty viable option. Places like Northampton or Milton Keynes. And I know those are pretty well connected either by train or bus from London or, the major airports. It seems like those are kind of the places where it's pretty reasonable to get to and from a major city and a place to either stay or do a daily commute. It seems like it would take a lot more time, but it seems doable. And there's also, if there's a lot of congestion, if you take a shuttle to Milton Keynes before you catch your train, there's places that you can hang out and eat, drink a beer, kill some time, wait out traffic. Or if you stay there, it seems like that's a pretty good place to stay as well. There's right near the train station in Milton Keynes, it seems like there's a lot of stuff that's just walking distance that you can get around.
Yeah, there's a big new series of hotels and restaurants surrounding a courtyard. There's also a big shopping center right near there within walking distance. Sean, you know a lot about Milton Keynes, don't you? It's one of those planned cities.
Yeah, I was going to say that, for Americans, it would feel like the most familiar of layouts because it is planned on a grid system more than most UK cities, and because it was planned and constructed, it's sort of in between the two major arteries that link that part of the road network, the M1 and the M40. It means you've got quite a lot of transport options if you are renting a car. You've got proximity to London. You could take the train back and forth if you so wish. There are lots of options there. It's funny. It is often used as the sort of the butt of humor among British people, saying because the most boring place in the UK because it's a grid and they've planned it all out and it hasn't grown organically. But as a functional thing, it is actually quite agreeable, and there are quite a lot of things. There's plenty of places to eat, that sort of stuff. So yeah, that is quite enjoyable.
And there's a famous museum, I believe, which commemorates the code breakers from World War II.
Huh.
Oh yeah. Is
That's
that
one of
in
Enigma.
Milton Keynes?
I think it's on the outskirts. It's very close to it, where they cracked the Enigma code.
Yeah,
That's
I
wild.
feel. Yeah, I forget exactly where it would be. But it's Bletchley Park.
Bletchley Park. That's the
Yes,
name. Yeah.
and if you type it into Google right now, if you type Bletchley Park into Google, you'll see Google have actually put it in code, and it decodes the name of it in the search results.
Very cool.
So yes, I was like, I knew it wasn't called
that's
Milton
awesome.
Keynes. I couldn't remember the name of it, so I had to double check. So I just punched it up, and there it is. It decodes the answer for you.
That's so sick. That's worthwhile.
So yeah, if you want to try and crack some of the codes of the Formula One team radio, there's your first lesson.
I'm sure there's like a Google job application buried in this webpage. If you inspect the page source, you'll find it.
So, of course, it's fair to say July is going to be a busy month for Formula One. We have 4 race weekends in July: Austria, the UK, and then one non-race weekend, and then Hungary and Spa.
Yes, unusual. Spa being in July for the first time.
Wonder what that's going to do to the weather.
Yeah, probably nothing. Probably it just means that it'll be blazing hot at La Source and a thunderstorm at Les Combes. But you would assume it would increase our chances of a dry, unaffected race. But I think as much as anything, I think they tried to put some distance in the calendar between that and the Dutch Grand Prix because the Spa and Zandvoort geographically are only 2.5 hours drive apart. And last year they were actually back-to-back weekends, which made it functionally very, very easy to work.
It was awesome for me. I did both.
You woke up on Monday morning in Malmedy or one of the towns around the track and then thought, right, well, let's all pile in the car and drive up the motorway to Amsterdam. And away we went. So it is a little from a spectator point of view, if you're choosing one of those to attend, it doesn't make any difference to you. But for those of us who are working, or for fans who would like to go to 2 Grand Prix in quick succession, it does kind of take that off the table a little bit because you unless you want to make 2 trips to roughly the same area a month apart.
There's talk in the future that they may rotate those 2 races.
Yeah,
but don't know how that rotation. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about certain races potentially rotating in the future, but we've not seen that yet.
Yeah, it'd be cool to get a German Grand Prix back. I remember when Nürburgring rotated with Hockenheim, and that, seems like a crowd would be there, but I don't know the whole logistics of it.
Yeah, I think that is dependent on Mercedes now pushing for it because you haven't got Vettel out there. You don't have a Schumacher on the grid. And
Well,
obviously,
TBD, right?
Sorry.
I said TBD, right? Wasn't that the one of the rumors?
Well, as of this conversation, there is not a Schumacher on the grid, and of course, there's no, Nico Rosberg retired after becoming the world champion, so there's a bit of a dearth on the German scene right now, which we haven't really seen since, 91 when Michael came on the scene. But, around the end of the 80s, there wasn't really a lot of German representation on the grid. It was Michael who ushered that era in. So for the first time, for a lot of people, for the first time in their lives, they're having to cope with the idea that there isn't a German in a race winning car. So it'd be more difficult to get a German Grand Prix, which
Audi will have any impact.
That might they might do. Obviously, that's a few years away yet. And Hockenheim, as critical as everyone is of the modern Hockenheim, and how it's it's boring compared to the old track. Well, we actually, newsflash, at the time we thought the old track was boring because it was just long straight chicane, long straight chicane, long straight chicane, stadium section, long straight chicane. But it did provide its own unique character going out into the forest where there was nobody, and then coming back into the stadium section. The new track in Hockenheim, because it's not that new, it's 21 years old now. They changed it in 2002. It is a great racetrack. It's great for Formula One. They can really race each other on that track. So it did achieve its intended purpose, which is it kept. It was still good for Formula One racing, and they were able to keep the track going. So it achieved those ends, even though it's kind of become a bit of a punch bag or a bit of a punch.
The last race in 2019 was pretty memorable.
Yes, yeah. That was the first
ice rink.
That was the first time we'd ever had a safety car start going into a standing start, where they ran on the track behind the safety car, and then safety car came in and they formed up for a standing start. That was the first time we ever used that protocol. And I also think that was the race where Nico Hülkenberg basically sunk his career. And he'd been back on the grid.
Opportunity,
yeah. It was. There's a lot of examples of Hülkenberg who could have been on the podium many times. Having situations where it almost literally slipped out of his hands. And that was the most egregious. And I'm convinced that was the moment where Renault decided, right, if we got, Esteban Ocon's number, please get him in the car. But yeah, that was a very exciting race because it was raining. And that was the race when Max Verstappen spun, I think. And that was 2019. So when Max Verstappen spun in that race and ended up winning.
Well, that he did it again in Hungary. Was it last year?
Yep. Yeah, he's good at that.
Yeah, I was hoping it would happen in Montreal.
He's gotten quite good at winning in general lately. So, yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing a few pirouettes on the way to victory, just to jazz it up a little bit, because he went off the road in Australia this year, and it didn't affect him. So he just ran off, had a little run across the grass. So he's not immune from making a few flubs along the way. The thing is that he doesn't make them in places where you'll get, the stiff penalty. Not when there's a barrier right next to him.
Yeah. So we've got a question from Mouse96 about they're staying in Milton Keynes. They're taking a stagecoach bus to the track every day. They're wondering how busy the service is and if they need to get in line early. They should be leaving around 7 a.m., but I just don't know how efficient it is for queuing.
I think it's pretty efficient. I think we talked about the fact that the official departures are every half an hour, but if they have more than a bus load of people, then they have a line of buses ready to go. So it is pretty efficient and well run. I think it should be fine. Generally the issue is more at the other end at a busy racetrack. Especially after qualifying after the race. But again, I think everything's pretty well organized in the UK, and hopefully there'll be a queuing system, and even if there are a lot of people, the queue should move pretty quickly.
Yeah. What about, we didn't cover it, but the accessibility seating options that we have, like, what about that aspect of it? I can pull up a slide we have.
It seemed, from what I've read, it looks like they kind of have some accessible viewing platforms that you have to get a specific ticket for ahead of time so that they can try to plan and organize. But it seems like it's a viewing platform that should be fairly easy to get to. And I don't know what the infrastructure is as far as getting you to that part of the circuit, depending on where you are. I know some circuits will have a handicap parking that specifically comes with your ticket to try to accommodate you parking or getting as close as possible to your section to minimize the travel distance to your seat. But I'm not sure what Silverstone has for that. It might be able to detail some of that on their website, and I just haven't seen it. But, it seems like they have quite a big range of viewing platforms for the accessible, like wheelchair areas.
Cool.
And one thing I noticed with Montreal was like I noticed like 1 or 2 spots where they had that, and that like I logged 13 miles on Saturday on my watch.
He dragged me from one end of the track to the other and back.
Yeah, we were sitting over at Grandstand 11 by turn 2, and so that's a hike. And I also logged 10 miles on Sunday.
Well, I ran it, so I did the like try and beat the crowd, getting to the metro, and so I literally ran from T2 to the subway. I don't know.
Yeah, but everyone on the hairpin got there ahead of you.
No, well, I left a little early, and I just like bolted.
Yeah, as soon as that rain started happening in Q3, you're just like, yeah, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, like I know where this is going. And then I ended up getting like, oh, Hulkenberg's on the podium. Well, or sorry, he's P2, so
yeah,
minus the penalty.
Yeah, so next race, I'll be in Austria next weekend. We had a pretty successful meetup in Montreal last Saturday, and we had about 20 people show up from a couple of different group chats. That was pretty fun, and just had a few beers and talked about not just Formula One, just kind of things in general, just having a good night. And we'll be doing one on Saturday in Graz in Austria for the Red Bull Ring. So if anybody can make it out, feel free. We've got a reservation at what's the place we're doing it at? Hops Craft Beer.
Yeah.
I should probably know this. I have it saved.
Likewise, I didn't think about it.
What a very unusual name for a place you go to for a get together in Austria.
It's Hops Craft Beer Pub. It's in Graz, and we have a reservation for 9 p.m. We'll likely have some food to get things started. And if you're in the area, you can show up and have a beer, and we can hang out. No pressure to drink or not, but
does that include me?
Yeah. Okay. Feel free to come. You could take a helicopter from the Red Bull Ring. Well,
that's how I always get around. Yeah. I always bring my
rope ladder.
Have the chauffeur.
Yeah. Well, it's always Andy always pilots it because he always knows the fastest routes in and out of there. So
exactly.
Yeah. So I'll be out there for that race. It should be a good time. I've never been to Red Bull Ring. I'm pretty excited about doing it.
It's a fantastic track. You'll have a great weekend.
And of course, there is still the skeletal remains of the Österreich Ring around and beyond what is now the first corner of the racetrack. If you go straight on there, you'll find the ghosts of 1970.
There's actually a shuttle. In 2021, I went to Styrian Grand Prix, and there's a shuttle from the fan zone up to turn 3 or the T3 grandstand, and it goes on the track, the old track.
Wow.
Yeah,
right.
Still very much there.
I always said, I would have Dietrich Mateschitz' children if he could successfully restore that part of the racetrack. Because I don't particularly care for the layout of the modern track, partly because I suspect the only one of us who actually watched a Formula One race on the old track. I
did start. I was watching F1 by then, and I still remember all those onboards from '87.
Yeah,
just incredible stuff.
For years thereafter, I said that was my favorite track of 1987, and then they got rid of it. Which actually they were within their rights to get rid of it because everyone who I know who went said the facilities were atrocious. It was far too narrow. It was not fit for purpose. But if it could have been made fit for purpose, it would have been a phenomenal racetrack. I mean, I can't imagine a modern Formula One car going around that layout now. They'd be almost flat around some of these big corners, Tirok Curve and Bosch Curve, and be phenomenal. I bet they might run a charge. Now that I think of it, just have the one chicane per lap, and then the rest of the time they're absolutely arms and elbows on the limit around these corners. There's no other slow corners. It would all be 5th and 6th gear these days. Just wow. Hold on to your hat.
Cool. Yeah. Do you guys got anything else to add? I think we're going to start running this thing off.
No, have a great time in the Red Bull Ring, Adam.
Yeah, we'll be out there, and feel free
Sean.
if anybody's looking for some group chat stuff. We've got a pretty good channel set up on FanAmp. Feel free to download the app; it's free, and we've got a live chat going for during the race. We've got things going on for the race meetups and just sharing some live tips throughout the weekend, line situations, what security is like. You never know how picky they'll be. It's kind of a lottery sometimes.
Yeah, even dinners, like we did it in Barcelona, we did it in Italy, in Canada. So definitely jump in. And if you're there for the full weekend, it's a great way to meet people.
Yeah, one thing I'd be vigilant about was, of course, there was some reports of some unsavory behavior in the grandstands in Austria last year. So it's possible that security might be a little bit more zealous, and perhaps overly so, as a reaction to that, not necessarily as a reaction to the people who are standing in front of them, but they might have been briefed in advance. Let's cut this off before it gets out of hand.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully the weather works out. I wouldn't mind a wet sprint race and then a drag GP.
Oh, it's a sprint weekend. Oh,
yeah.
Oh no,
it's gonna be a long weekend for both of you guys.
Oh, why'd you have to say that? Right, that means more work for me. I've got to do all this extra research and kind of figure out, like, how do we put sprint stats together? Is it, do we count it for this? Do we count?
Just be thankful that Brad Pitt doesn't start till the weekend after.
Why, God, why? Well, at least it isn't. I tell you what, at least it isn't the guy who's fastest in the bloody Q3 gets pole position no matter what happens anymore. So, at least I don't have to stick pins in a, voodoo doll of, the ghost of Bernie Ecclestone. At least I got past that part. So it's not all doom and gloom. In Baku, it worked rather more straightforward. It was just like Saturday was like a standalone day in the middle of the weekend. So
like a GP
so
within
there's
a GP.
Yeah. So there we go.
But yeah, join the conversation on FanAmp, and I'll probably be. I'm taking one of the shuttles from Graz, and I'll be out at the circuit probably early in the mornings, and probably just hang out and explore. I know they're doing the green carpet event on Sunday morning, starting at 9, where you can show up and hopefully meet some of the drivers, similar to the Melbourne Walk, and then meet up on Saturday, and then it's going to be a bit busy.
The real trick is if you message Adam in the morning, he has beer for you, and so you can drink all day.
That happened in Montreal.
I've got one final thought for those who think all of us who work in Formula One are absolutely completely organized. I have currently, as I'm sitting here before you, no idea when my flight goes, no idea when my flight lands, no idea where how to get to the hotel, and no idea what the hotel is called. Other than that, everything is completely sorted. I'm ready to go.
No, your suitcase isn't packed, you said.
I've just opened my suitcase from getting back from the Formula E race in Portland. So it is kind of packed. But the thing is, I don't know what time I'm going to be there. I don't know what I'm doing when I get there. It'll be great. Don't worry. It'll all go great. There'll be no problems. Nothing can stop us now. We are a well-oiled machine. It's going to be fantastic, folks. We're not going to mess anything up.
Yeah, definitely.
I love it. Well, I can't wait to hear about the debrief from it all. So we'll do it again.
as long as it's a debrief and not a statement to police, I'm fine.
Another group chat I'm on is the Missed Apex podcast. That Slack group is pretty great. It gets pretty lively during the races and qualifying, just everything. And I've met up with a couple people in Montreal from that group as well. And it's a great podcast to follow. They put some pretty great content out. And I know Sean's been on there as well.
Yeah, that's Richard Reddy's podcast. To my mind, he should be doing TV and national radio. He's got the voice for it, and
yes,
I'm envious. I'm envious of his delivery. I wish my voice, because I think my voice is irritating, but he's got a great voice. He should be doing national radio.
Yeah, he's a great dude. It's a good group of guys and ladies that are part of the Missed Apex podcast. And Andrew, we've got you with F1 Destinations. Got a lot of really great info on your website. Feel free to check that out, guys. And Sean, what are your handles? Where could we see some of your quick stats that aren't being fed to David Croft?
Well, you'll find the stats on my Twitter handle @virtualstatman, or alternatively, you can see pictures of my escapades on Instagram @virtualstatman. And I should add that I've got about 35,000 followers on Twitter and only about 1,800 on Instagram, which is a damning indictment of the amount of people who want to hear from me versus the amount of people who want to look at me.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I guess we'll see you guys next time.
Farewell for now.
Thanks, guys.
See your
Yeah.
stats. We
All right,
won't see
thanks,
your
guys.
Bye, guys.